Geek Therapy Radio.
Welcome to the Geek Therapy Radio podcast. I'm your mental curator, Johnny Hemberger. Thank you so much for joining me this morning, this afternoon, this evening, whenever you're listening to the Geek Therapy Radio podcast. I very, very, very much appreciate it. So, as I often do on the Geek Therapy Radio podcast, I want to go over a little bit of house cleaning, a little bit of some topics that I would like to discuss with you, the listener of Geek Therapy Radio, behind the scenes related things. So you may have noticed, those of you who are more keen and listen every day or try to listen every day, I haven't released many podcasts this week, and I'm going to be real honest with you guys and girls. I am trying to find a balance in how much work I do, just even for this show each week. It is an absolutely astronomical amount of work that I put into this each week, and I love to do it. I'm not complaining. It's not backbreaking work. I'm not out there in 100-degree heat digging ditches, or I'm not serving in the Army or the Marines or anything like that. This is not any sort of backbreaking, dangerous job that I'm doing. This is just, it's Geek Therapy Radio. We talk about geeky things on here, have real conversations on here, yes, sometimes. But it's not any rigorous activity. But there's still a lot of time I put into this each week. So I'm trying to find that balance. And doing a podcast every single day, remember, I'm a one-man operation over here. I'm recording these, I'm editing these, I'm mixing these. In addition to the broadcast that now airs 2 hours per week, which is good. That's kind of a promotion there. Getting added hours on the actual radio, that's a good thing. In addition to the YouTube stuff and everything else that goes into it, I felt like I was stretched too thin. Every single day it was, oh my goodness, I got to do the podcast on top of everything else. And I really always enjoy doing it, but it was spread too thin, and I'm trying to find a balance. So I think here's where we're at. And if this is news to you, and I imagine it's probably news to most of you, I brought this up earlier this week on Facebook and Twitter. So if you don't follow me on Facebook or Twitter or any of the social media, you should do that, because from time to time I get on there and I let you know things that I don't always get to here on the podcast or the broadcast. So I highly suggest, if you want kind of the most current information, because it's way easier for me to hop onto Twitter or Facebook and say, hey, I'm trying to find a balance in how many podcasts I do each week. It's a lot of work over here. I let you know that instantly. It's easier to do that, to take a couple seconds and do that on social media. So I highly implore you, if you want to be the most abreast of what's going on behind the scenes at Geek Therapy Radio, go like the Geek Therapy Radio Facebook page or follow me on Twitter. It's just Geek Therapy Radio on Twitter. I think the technical handle is at Geek Therapy KPRC, because there's only so many characters you can put into a Twitter handle, an @ or whatever. So if you just on Twitter and you type in Geek Therapy Radio, it'll come up. But yeah, that's the way that it can stay most in touch with you guys. Also, it's a good way to get instant access to asking me questions and talking to me. Email also works, but I don't send out a big giant emailer to everybody who's emailed me with what I've got going on behind the scenes at Geek Therapy Radio. I do that kind of mass blanketing type of thing on the Twitter and on the Facebook. So again, follow me there and you'll be all good to go, and you'll be the most current possible. And you can at me. You can at me after I say something like that. Oh, why are you doing this? Oh, whatever. Say what you think about it through there. But yes, so back to the subject at hand. And we're going to talk about something, the meat and potatoes later on of this podcast involving cloud gaming and different companies in cloud gaming. But back to what I was talking about. So I think what I've decided on, what I've landed on is uploading 3 podcasts per week. So on Monday, I plan to upload the broadcast podcast. So the show that aired over the weekend, I will post that on Monday. On Wednesday will be a regular Geek Therapy Radio podcast, and on Fridays will be a Geek Therapy Radio podcast. So new content Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And I feel like that is going to be a much better balance. I promise you, most of the podcasts you listen to, they don't usually come out with a new podcast every single day. It's usually one day a week, if that your favorite podcast release podcast. So I still feel like I'm putting out a ton of content by coming out with a podcast 3 days a week, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. I'll just be real honest again. There's a lot of my own personal geek things that I put on the back burner when I was doing 5 podcasts per week. It was a giant experiment to do 5 podcasts a week, and it wound up being, I don't have any time to make music. I barely have any time to play video games if I want, relax if I want. I don't like coming home from work. I already get home from work later than my wife currently, and I don't like coming home from work late around 9 p.m. and telling my wife, oh, I got to go upstairs and record a podcast now. I don't think that's fair to do every single day of the week. I also wanted the weekends open, and basically when I can leave on Friday having uploaded a podcast for you guys, having loaded the broadcast into the system to air over the weekend, that basically clears my weekend to pursue my various geek things, my tinkerings, the arcade machine, actually sit down or stand up with the arcade machine and play some games on there. YouTube, I noticed, and this was a big driver of this decision, I've put some stuff up on YouTube over the past few weeks, but there are big projects, the Q6600 project, that I just haven't been able to put as much time into because I felt like, well, I can't get to that because I got to do the daily podcast. So YouTube's going to get more love, more focused love. By far, the most popular videos that I have on YouTube, and to grow my brand over there as well, are specific specialized videos. They aren't just videos where I upload the podcast, where I just put a camera on my face and talk into the microphone and upload that to YouTube. No, that's all fine and dandy, and I will continue to upload those every now and then. But the very specific videos, the ones where I actually write out scripts and have a focused intent in mind, in deliberate B-roll, in deliberately speaking to the viewer, speaking to the listener. Well, it's YouTube, so the viewer. Those do much better. Much, much better. I just had my first 100,000 view video. I think maybe did that happen earlier this week or so? And that's not a huge thing. It's not a channel with 10 million subscribers or anything like that. But it's my first 100,000 view, organic video that. It was 100% out of my own mind, 100% my own words, 100% my own footage, 100% everything just for me, and I really appreciate it. It's got over 2,000 likes, which I don't really likes as far as YouTube goes. That's part of the algorithm. If people interact, likes and dislikes, if people are interacting with a thumbs up or thumbs down button, that's good. That tells the YouTube algorithm, hey, promote this video more. There's a lot of hubbub going on with this video. Let's put it in front of more people and see what they think. So that was my first video. It's the PSP video, by the way. Is the PSP still worth it video? So it was my first video to get over 1,000 likes. Now it's over 2,000 likes. That's good. That's good for the algorithm. It's the first video that I have that's gone over 100,000 views. That's good. That's good for the algorithm. It's helped me bolster the channel to, I think I'm at 2,600. What am I at now with the YouTube? Maybe it's 2,300, something like that, subscribers, which is not something. There are channels that, if we're talking about YouTube, there are channels that explode and grow a lot faster than that. There's channels that grow a lot less fast than that. And my goal, as of by January 2020, was just to have 1,000 subscribers. I made that goal back in spring of 2019. I said, by January 2020, 6 or 7 months from now, my goal is to have 1,000 subscribers, and I went well past 2,000 subscribers. I'm at 2,563 subscribers right now. So that's great. That's growth. I've never been a big one to focus on just the actual size of the number. I always try to focus on the growth. And that growth, when you're focusing on growth, that has exceeded my expectations by over 200%. So that's a good track record. And the only way I'm able to do that is to keep that side of it growing. I treat YouTube as promotion, basically. All my eggs are not in the YouTube basket. Anything I earn from YouTube, it's in a special account going towards things that'll help the show. So right now I have it in a little account called New Computer or something like that. My quad core 4790K is still fine for gaming and everything, but it's not the best in the world for content creation. And when I do these podcasts, when I do make YouTube videos and everything, time is precious. Time is precious. I don't want to hit render and then be waiting for 30 minutes for something to finish, or over 30 minutes, an hour for something to finish, when it can be done in 2 or 3 minutes. When I render out the podcast, it does take quite a while. It's a long podcast. They're usually between 15 and sometimes an hour. They take a little while to render out, because I render it out at the best possible quality as far as MP3 is concerned. Because that's kind of a commitment to the listener. Before it gets up on the streaming services, I want to provide it with the best fidelity possible. So, and I don't want to be loading WAV files, massive WAV files, because if I had my way, I'd be recording at 24-bit 96K all the time. Sometimes I do record at that, but I'm not going to render it out at that gigantic file size and then wait around for that upload. So anyways, the YouTube money that I make right now, it's really not much. I'm not going to give you a specific number, but it's in a little separate account called New Computer, and it's going to help me be better and do better work for the show and for the YouTube channel. And I can do more focus on growing that part of the YouTube channel if I find a balance in how many podcasts I do. What else? I think that's really it. And that's not even counting, like I said, music. Sometimes I just want to pick up my electric guitar, my Schecter, what is it? C1 Hellraiser or Demon? Schecter Demon. That's the thing. It's been so long since I've been able just to pick up that guitar and jam. And I forgot what the exact model of the guitar is, and I would like to have time to do those things. I'm a geek about stuff too, and I would like to pursue those things more. Budget the time better. Be able to budget the time better. So I hope you'll understand that. Hopefully you'll understand my decision to reduce. Really, it's a reduction of 2 podcasts per week. It's just freeing up that time that in what I do towards making the podcast. It's just to free some time up a little bit. I love doing what I do, but I also we need a break sometimes. Sometimes I just want to put on Rocket League. I'll be real honest. Sometimes I just want to crack open a beer and put on Rocket League. Also, in the broadcast you'll hear, the next podcast I upload after this, it's going to be another podcast where I have several guests on the show. I interview Clint again from Lazy Game Reviews. We talk about arcades and arcade memories. The 8-bit guy, David Murray, also comes back on the show. And Colin from This Does Not Compute. That kind of thing takes time time and energy to sort out. The other thing is, there are specific podcasts that I upload, specific topics that need a whole lot more research, and this frees up time for me to do more research so that the podcast and stuff that I do put out can be better. It's less, but it's better. What did Ron Swanson say? Don't half-ass two things, whole-ass one thing. So I'm whole-assing three things. I'm still whole-assing a lot of different things, but it's all focused towards making the product better for you, the listener, and you, the viewer, on YouTube. When I interviewed Clint from LGR for this is what I was getting at by mentioning that. Interviewing Clint from LGR for the broadcast that's going to be, the podcast of that will be uploaded on Monday. We recorded that at 10 a.m. Central Standard Time. I would like to have time, and freeing up the podcast schedule allows me to do it. Loosening it up a little bit allows me to do this. I have to eat. I have to earn a living. And here's a little humble brag here, but the Geek Therapy Radio podcast, I think as of this week, or maybe it happened last week, is the number one podcast on my radio station outside of prime time. The only podcast that's doing better than my podcast is the guy who has a radio show for 2 hours a night at 5 p.m. rush hour, Monday through Friday. He has hundreds of thousands of more listens than I do. It's not even close. I can't even hope to surpass that in any reasonable time scale. But outside of the prime time, my little show that airs on the weekend, an hour on Saturday night at 10 p.m. and an hour on Sundays now at 6 p.m. The past few weeks I've had to compete with, unfortunately, Kobe Bryant. And last week I had to compete with the Super Bowl. But my little show, my little hour-long geek show that airs twice a week, is the number one podcast outside of Rush Hour. Technically, it's the number two podcast in the entire station. I need to eat. You know that when you listen to Geek Therapy Radio, you don't hear, unless you listen to the broadcast, you don't hear hardly any sponsors at all, ever. I have one sponsor right now on the broadcast. It's a mechanic that helped me fix my daily driver, that helped me fix Rowdy. That's who I've got as a sponsor on the broadcast, but there's no sponsors for the podcast. And how can I be the number one podcast outside of Rush Hour on a radio station and not have any sponsors? I need to make a better living out of this. It's time to start capitalizing on that. If you have any disillusion for whatever reason, maybe if you're listening in another part of the world or something that thinks because you're on the radio then you're very successful, you're very financially well off. That's not the case. I'm not going to tell you how much money I make. I would just tell you that I would wager most people listening would be shocked at the actual number, the actual salary that I make each year. I can certainly live off it, and I'm married, and I'm not starving, but I can't be producing a show and increasing the quality of it all and raising the numbers like I'm doing if the end goal isn't to feed myself. And who knows what's going to happen with my family over the next few years. Since I have a lot of new listeners who I haven't retold this story for, and I'm canceling the original intent of this podcast, the original subject of this podcast. If I haven't told you all, if you've come to this late in the game and haven't heard this, the goal of doing this radio show was not to get filthy, stupid Rush Limbaugh rich, Sean Hannity rich, Howard Stern rich. That hasn't been the goal. My goal from the outset is, I'll be real frank with you. I have a special needs sister, and my mother is getting up there in age. We're in no danger anytime soon, and we're not hungry. And my sister's fine. She's taken care of. That's what I mean. She's quadriplegic. She drowned when she was 2 years old. She was underwater for about 20 minutes. It's a miracle she's still alive. But when my mom goes, I am my sister's guardian at that point. I have to decide what to do with her. I'm responsible for her financially, however those finances come to be, whether it's through inheritances or government assistance or anything like that. There's a lot of stuff. There's stuff set up through the VA from my dad since he served in Vietnam. There's things that are in line, and I have to take care of all that. And my goal with Geek Therapy Radio has always been establish a career that offers the flexibility for me to tend to her as much as I need to, that by the time I am left to be her guardian, that I am not tied to a 9-to-5 job that would add an extra bit of complexity to caring for her. So I'm trying to build Geek Therapy Radio up. The goal of Geek Therapy Radio is also to help people. I want to establish that type of life and career for myself, to free up the time to devote to making sure my sister is taken care of. By doing a career and creating a radio show, a podcast, a media outlet that helps people also. That's why I always encourage you with all the love and the self and loving yourself and embracing your geek thing and knowing your self-worth, that if I am going to make money off this venture, I can't just take. I can't just take and start and just speak all sorts of hate speech and slander and rile you up and make you hate each other. That's why I didn't want to get into political radio. That if I can make a career like that frees me up from the bondage of a 9-to-5 job, of even having to come into the radio station every day. I have the home studio and everything set up. I'm gearing up so that I can do everything from home to allow me the freedom to make sure that when my mom passes away, I can be a good guardian to my sister, provide for my sister, with the help of my brothers and everything like that, but just make sure that I'm as free to help her out and care for her as much as possible. So I need time. I need to free up time to go out to potential sponsors and hobby shops and car dealerships and whatever, and try to get sponsors for the show. I've tried to grow the show. I've matured the show enough and got the numbers up high enough that I need to start making something of it. I need to start making a better living with it. And I hope you guys, for all the reasons I just went into, I hope everyone understands that if I do start having sponsors on the show, I'm going to be doing it as ethically as possible and as effortless for you, the listener. I'm not just going to be peppering the show all over the place with all these different sponsors. I'm going to have them in their own places, and you know what's going to come up. And I'm fully aware of the skip 30 seconds ahead function on podcast players. I'm trying to make it easy for you to handle my ads, however you want to handle my ads, but also make it appealing to the sponsors. There's a balance there, and I have to start thinking about the future of this operation. I think, if within a year there's no headway in that financial aspect of Geek Therapy Radio, I'm going to have to re-examine. I'm going to be 37 years old by that time, almost 38 years old, almost 40 years old. I'm going to have to reevaluate. For all the reasons that I mentioned a few minutes ago, I'm going to have to reevaluate what I'm doing. So I have to get the ball rolling. It's been very encouraging. I've been able to do a lot with what I have right now as far as growing the show. This little show that nobody had any idea ever existed 3 years ago. Been able to build it solidly into what it is today. Now I need to start capitalizing on it. Need to start making a living with it, and that's one reason why I'm finding the balance in how much time and devotion I put into making a production every single day. Where I would record a Geek Therapy Radio podcast in the morning, I would like to stop by a hobby shop on my way to work and start a dialogue there and get a sponsor out of them. And I hope you guys understand that. You know what, honestly, there's a lot of people who simply have no concept of economics and the realities of having a radio show and sponsors. They think it's all out of greed. All you do is pimp your merch every time you make a video about something. Yes, that's what they're supposed to do. They have employees. They have families. My whole thing is, as long as you do it ethically, as long as you're not saying, "Hey, go buy this vape," or you're not just bombarding people with 10 minutes of ads and then 2 minutes of content, As long as it's 10 minutes of content and maybe 2 minutes of ads, that's perfectly fine. That's the way the world works. It takes money even at the baseline level to fund an operation, to put out podcasts, to record videos. Where do those cameras come from? Where do the microphones come from? You have to pay services to host podcasts and to host videos. Well, you don't have to pay YouTube. They do it other ways. They put ads on it. But you get what I'm saying. It costs money. And I'll tell you right now, if anyone has a beef, knowing who I am and being with me this long, if anybody has a beef, if they start hearing ads on my show, I'll be quite frank. You don't have to listen. You don't have to. Because that means you don't support me. And that's fine. That's completely fine with me. You're not breaking my heart if you start hearing a couple ads on the podcast and you say, oh, he's sold out, and you leave. That's fine. Adios, amigo. That's fine. I'm not trying to force anybody to stick around. And if me putting food in my mouth and my family's mouth bothers you, adios. I'm sorry to be so harsh about that, but there's just people that have no concept of how this kind of enterprise works. But I promise you, I'm going to keep it ethical, 100% ethical and honest to you, the listener. Everything I do is going to be above board and clear as day to you listening, because I need your trust just as much as you trust me, or I trust you to keep listening. It's up to you. If I have your support, great. I just hope you understand what I'm doing going forward. You can always email me your thoughts on whatever I said today, geektherapy@iheartmedia.com. The email is always in the podcast description. Everything associated with the show, including the music, is always in the podcast description. You can find really good stuff down there. If you like Geek Therapy Radio, I highly encourage you to share it with your friends and family if you think they'll like it. It's not going to be everyone's cup of tea. That's just the reality of it. That's the reality of anything. But thank you for listening to Geek Therapy Radio. Know that you are worthy of love. You really are. You are worthy of love. You are worthy of your own self-worth and your own self-respect. Find your geek thing. Lean into your geek thing. Share your geek thing with others. And I think we'll all be better off. Thank you for listening to me just go off today. All I was going to say, I'll save it for another podcast, but all I was going to mention initially was that how silly it is that Microsoft says they see Amazon and Google as their main gaming threats, as if Steam and NVIDIA GeForce Now don't exist. But we'll get into that in much more depth later. Thank you for listening to the Geek Therapy Radio podcast. God bless you all. Seriously, I went off tonight. Thank you for listening, and thank you for your continued support. And I'll talk to you in the next one.